It is the second model introduced in the 2024 ZOIDS Slash Zero collaboration, sporting the likeness of the iconic Berserk Fury of that series. It is ZSZ01 Fuhrer, with a kit of Emit shot, Railgun, Big Bang, wheeled legs, and the leg ability of Auto Charge, which passively fills Metaforce gauge every turn regardless of action completed. Now, as the second model introduced in the ZOIDS Slash Zero collaboration, which is a mini collab sporting in the second run of the ZOIDS collab in 2024, Fuhrer is most certainly not pulling any punches when it comes to the kind of damage it can bring to the table, and a very synergetic, very all-round synergetic shooting-based kit that you can use almost out of the box, which will pump back into itself on any terrain that he's good on. Emit shot on the head part is a new skill, relatively new, but also similar to another that we've seen so far. Essentially, it is a shooting version of Emit blade, but for sake of explanation, Emit shot is a conventional shooting type skill that consumes charge from the user's Metaforce gauge, very similarly to Charge Blade or Charge Buster or Hyper Charge Blade and so on, but this one is a little more expensive but also much more lucrative. Upon consuming 30% of the user's Metaforce charge, it will double the user's damage and also grant them piercing bonus on top of that. And with a base power of just over 2300, that attack is going to be hitting immensely hard when it does hit. Even if the opponent tries to tank it as best as they can, at least one part is going to be broken with an attack that powerful. At the trade-off of that immense damage modifier though, if the user does not have 30% charge in their gauge, they are not allowed to use Emit shot at all. It's essentially, in comparison to even Hyper Charge Blade or Hyper Charge Buster, which are relatively similar in terms of charge consumption, Emit shot cannot be used at all, and it requires charge to be in the gauge in order for them to use it. Whereas with HC Buster or Blade, you're still able to use it whether or not you have the charge it can consume. Railgun on the right arm is a conventional shooting skill that packs passive defense ignore and passive piercing right out of the box. That means that this is a very incredible and very well-rounded shooting skill that you can generally never go wrong with using, because it's always going to be ignoring the enemy's resistance stats when it's attacking and damaging a part, and it also has the passive piercing for guaranteeing that if it does break something, you're going to be getting a little bit more carryover damage aside from just your basic spot nuking. Big Bang on the left arm is another conventional shooting skill that has a very unique damage condition, but if done correctly can be just as catastrophic as Railgun or even Emit shot if in the right conditions. That condition is, upon attacking a target, if the targeted part on the opponent has 100% HP. That means if the part is completely unscratched, as in like from the start of battle, it has an up to 70% chance to insta-break it, no ifs, ands, or buts, period. However, if it damages a part on the target that has already been attacked and does not have full HP, Big Bang will instead restore HP to that part of the damage it would have dealt on a regular attack. So Big Bang, compared to Emit shot or even Railgun, is a little bit of a gambling skill that guarantees you're gonna need to be using it within the first 2 or 3 turns at the most in order to make use of it and break things. Otherwise, it's gonna be kind of there as a liability and just healing enemies more than actually breaking them. Wheeled legs means that Fuhrer will have very solid high base mobility and pretty solid well-rounded stats at that, at the cost that wheeled legs are also incredibly picky on the terrain that they're good at. That includes Cyber, which everybody gets S rank on no matter what, and aside from Arena and maybe even City or Road, it's going to be really struggling on a lot of terrain, so Fuhrer is going to be kind of held back by its own high speed and specs if it's not on terrain it's already good at. But if you're able to fix that with, say, someone with field control or Dominion, or someone who can even change the terrain with a Metaforce nuke, that possibly might be able to help fix the issue to a point. But that is usually the trade-off that you get with wheeled legs, is high mobility and good specs, but terrible terrain matching compatibility. However, the leg ability of Auto Charge is really nice though, as it does synergize with its kit back into Emit shot, which means over the course of the next couple of attacks, as it's collecting Metaforce charge, it will be able to use Emit Shot every couple turns as it breaks things or charges, but just not something it can use immediately. With a base mobility of 982, it is basically par for the course with wheeled legs to have a high speed of almost 1,000 on average, but with relatively well-rounded stats as well, with an evade of 1048, a melee resist of 1038, and a shoot resist of 1612, that means that it will have a pretty fair time dodging or grazing, and it can most certainly hold its own at range or up close and personal. So compared to Liger Zero, who is just a little bit lighter on the armor, this one can hold its own just a little bit better as far as taking hits without anything breaking. On that note though, it is most certainly packing far better armor than that of Liger Zero, with a head armor of 4379, almost 4400, right arm at just over 3800, left arm at just over 3900, and legs at 4200. Fuhrer is a very healthy boy as far as the HP department is concerned. So, like I said, compared to Liger Zero, who is very light on the armor and kind of relies on G control, Fuhrer has a lot of very solid specs right out of the box that make it just a little bit easier and more user-friendly as far as conventional shooting, combat, and artillery is concerned. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I honestly still have to rate Fuhrer a pretty well-rounded 7 out of 10 as well. Excluding any particular flaws or shortcomings that come with being a wheeled leg and having very specific terrain matches, Fuhrer is still very solidly synergetic with its own kit. It can start with Big Bang right from turn 1 and start breaking at least one part right from the start, with that very high chance of breaking something instantly. And then from there it can basically swap to Railgun as necessary if it finds that the enemy's already taken a couple hits. And with the right nature and pairing with auto charge, it can also fire off an Emit Shot whenever it has enough CG to consume and afford it. So you have plenty of options with Fuhrer when it comes to the kind of attacks that it brings to the table and how you're able to use it. As mixed parts, I do have to rate him just a little bit higher at a 7.5 out of 10 for these same reasons. While it's an incredibly synergetic kit unto itself, one of the biggest weaknesses to Fuhrer is the fact that it is wheel-legged, which will really hurt its overall terrain compatibility. But if you are able to change the leg to something more compatible, such as say a multi-leg or a floating leg or a bipedal type leg, and even if it doesn't synergize 100% with Emit Shot, you can comp that pretty easily. Alternatively, Railgun and Big Bang are also very solid skills you can use basically anywhere for conventional shooting, and with Big Bang being on an arm as well, meaning you have basically the free use of it at any given time without being limited to head usage, such as say on Gothic Mate or Grid Universe from the Gridman collab as another example. And non-heavy Railgun at that, can't argue, but on the terrains that you are able to use wheeled legs on, wheeled legs with a heavy support of 2 and auto charge means it'll be a fantastic choice for any of your charge reliant nukers, either melee or shooting orient.